The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa says it will begin mobilizing workers at motor industry plants to prepare to down tools ahead of a planned shutdown following a deadlock in wage talks. The parties met twice this week but failed to reach an agreement. The motor industry was represented by the Retail Motor Industries and the Fuel Retail Association and the auspices of the Motor Industries Bargaining Council. Now, things came to a head after the industry advanced a 4% offer over a 3-year agreement. Numsa rejected the offer, which is aimed at garage attendants, its lowest paid category of workers, currently earning 21 Rand an hour. Joining us now for an update on the possible strike is Numsa's national spokesperson, Phakamile Hlubi, Majola. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. You've been calling for a double-digit increase from as far back as April of this year. You met with employers this week. How did those discussions go?
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you for having me on the show. We did meet with employers this week under the auspices of the Motor Industries Bargaining Council. Unfortunately, we still have no new offer. And as you correctly put it in your intro, employers are offering 4% increase. But we have since shifted our position from a double-digit demand to demanding 9% to 9.5% across the board. That's where we are now. And really for us, this is a sign of our commitment to try and compromise and try and, bridge the gap between ourselves and employers with a view of trying to actually settle these wage talks without having to resort to strike action. Unfortunately, this week, it was frustrating in the sense that we dealt with picketing rules. We're going to get an outcome on that next week. But unfortunately, we are still where we are, where the employer does not want to shift from the position of 4% as an offer across the board.
With the strike process currently playing out, and I would imagine that you're hoping to not get to a strike, but push to it because the employer is not budging. What would that mean for the general public and motorists who may be filling up at fuel stations?
The Motor Industries Bargaining Council represents about 306,000 workers in the motor sector. And this includes workers who work in petrol garages, as well as garage dealerships, as well as components companies. If we were to embark on a strike action, that would result in disruptions most likely at your petrol garages in terms of petrol attendants or attendants not being able to assist you. There might be disruptions when it comes to your auto manufacturer, because if the component companies are on strike, which is the companies that provide services to the auto companies, the auto employers, then that has a knock-on effect down the line. There's also likely to be disruptions at car dealerships. That's the entire sector as a whole. Those are the companies that are represented. As a trade union, we do continue to call on employers to come to the table for us to find a way to resolve this without resorting to strike action. As you know, that when workers embark on a strike, it means that they are giving up their wages for every day that they go on strike. And some of these are among the lowest paid. So we really would try, and we would prefer to avoid a strike and rather try and resolve this through talks.
In looking at some reports from responses of the auto employers, one has said that what is fundamental is to get a multi-year agreement, fix a realistic point at which to settle. Is that in line with more or less your demands, a multi-year agreement?
So just to differentiate that, we're talking about the motor sector, not the auto sector. The auto sector represents OEMs, which are, your companies like Nissan, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, etc. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about a different sector, as I said, components companies, garages, as well as car dealerships. And when it comes to that sector, yes, indeed, they are looking for a multi-year agreement, at least 3 years. We are not opposed to 3-year agreements. We would like a scenario, though, where we try and come closer to each other. The lowest paid worker is a garage worker who's earning 21 Rand an hour. They're earning even less than the minimum wage. And what currently is on the table is an offer of 4% from the Fuel Retailers Association. For us, that really is not meaningful. I mean, a 4% increase for someone who earns 21 Rand an hour, in our view, that's not really good enough. And so we're really calling on employers to improve that offer. We do feel that if we can narrow the gap between 9% and 4%, we can avoid a national shutdown in the motor sector.
So what are your time frames in terms of preparing for your strike action with the communication that you're doing in terms of the process?
Where we are right now is that when we met with MIBCO, we presented the picketing rules. We made submissions for picketing rules, and the employers did the same. We're expecting an outcome on the picketing rules next week, Tuesday. MIBCO will also give us an outcome on and issue us with a strike certificate. So what that basically means is that once we have the strike certificate, we then have the right to call a strike. But we are currently in the process of mobilizing members, having National Shop Stewards Council meetings. Numsa traditionally does not just simply embark on strike action. We need to get a mandate from workers through these meetings at regional level, and there has to be an NEC meeting that has to be called in order to make the call basically for the strike. So we have not reached that process yet, but at the moment the mobilization is taking place, the general meetings are taking place, and so are the National Shop Stewards Council meetings.
So, very lastly, before we let you go, Phakamile, my understanding is that Numsa represents around 90,000 members in the motor sector. Looking at the scale of this strike, is that where you're looking in terms of numbers?
Yes, we do represent about 90,000 members out of 306,000 workers of the entire sector. We're the majority union in that sector. And, a strike of this magnitude would definitely result in disruptions. We would prefer not to embark on that route because workers really do pay dearly for a strike. We think that we can find each other. There's still time. And there's definitely opportunities for the union to engage in bilaterals with employer associations to try and bridge this gap. I think the main thing here that must be understood is that the cost of living has had a major impact on South Africans in general. Now, you can imagine that when you're dealing with a worker who's earning less than the minimum wage, it's even worse. Garage workers do not get a night shift allowance. They are earning very little. The little that they earn, they spend the majority of that on transportation. They're working awkward hours, coming in early in the morning, knocking off late at night. This has been a burning demand for many years. And if we can just resolve some of the burning demands, particularly that issue of the transport allowance for garage workers, and also find a way just to narrow the gap on the across-the-board wage demand, we do believe that we can settle this round of wage talks without having to resort to strike action.
Very well. Thank you for your time and that update. Numsa National Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi, Majola, speaking to the looming strike that could take place from